So, as many of you know by now, I'm often on the lookout for indie games inspired by the Megami Tensei franchise, and I'm usually happy to spread the word of them. But this particular game is such a dumpster fire of a project and full of so many red flags that I just had to talk about it here. Brace yourselves for Gakuin Makyo, aka High School Crisis. Stupid name, by the way. That's not one of the red flags, but it's worth mentioning. This game was originally supposed to launch on Steam in early November 2024, but it ended up getting delayed a bit, and there's also a supposed Switch port coming sometime in the future. I'm here today to tell you not to buy either. Gakuin Makyo was developed by Korean studio Pysoft and published by CFK. I'm not really familiar with either of these studios, but I did look at CFK's website, and it looks like they may have been the Korean publisher on a few other titles, including the Switch port of Princess Maker 2. Now, I first heard about this game on Twitter toward the end of October, and saw that a lot of people talking about it were comparing it to Megami Tensei, including Japanese fans. Now, to be fair, usually my rule for talking about these things is that it doesn't matter what normal people are saying about it. I only really consider it a Megami Tensei-inspired indie if someone actually working on the game makes the comparison, which admittedly, I didn't find for this one. However, the game is a first-person dungeon crawler about a school that gets sucked into a world full of demons and you team up with other students to explore it. The most obvious comparison here is Shin Megami Tensei If, which is a first-person dungeon crawler about a school that gets sucked into a world full of demons and you team up with other students to explore it. But that's not what makes High School Crisis such a mess. I've played and even recommended games with similar premises in the past. The first thing about this game that jumped out at me was just how bland and lifeless these characters seemed. Nearly every single character is dressed exactly the same. And before you start going, well yeah, school uniforms and all, I'm once again gonna bring up SMT If, where all these characters wear their uniforms in distinct or memorable ways to paint a picture into who they are. Even Reiko, being one of the few to wear her uniform properly, says a lot about her character. The only character here who even slightly stands out is the mascot girl, Shiho, who has short red hair and wears a choker, so her being lax with the uniform and wearing a loosened tie kinda makes sense for her character from a visual perspective. Except, the boring-looking girl with long black hair and the boring-looking girl with long dark brown hair also have loosened ties, so there's absolutely no aesthetic charm or personality to either of these characters. And that's equally true for the guys. Again, your options are boring-looking guy with short black hair or boring-looking guy with short dark brown hair. Oh, but hey, black-haired guy slightly loosened his tie, so such a rebel. The protagonist of this game, who is just called Boy in the trailer, and I named Al in my file, that'll make sense in a bit, doesn't even get a proper design. He's just a blue glowing silhouette. But from what I can make out, he looks nearly identical to these other characters. I've complained about bland everyman protagonist designs being too simplistic in the past, but it's crazy to see a game where multiple party members are even blander than that. So, why are these designs so milquetoast, boring, and devoid of any artistic charm? And why am I so perfectly okay with dunking on them as hard as I possibly can? Because they were designed with generative AI. And I know this because, thankfully, Steam currently requires developers to state upfront if their game utilized artificial intelligence. And the page for High School Crisis states that not only did they use AI for the character designs, but some of the backgrounds and story illustrations. But don't worry, I can confirm that not all of the art in this game was made with AI, because some of it was just straight up stolen. In some of the promotional screenshots for the game, we see the party fight a three-headed dog named Orthus. They probably meant Orthrus, but that's fine. Trust me when I say it's hardly the biggest issue here. Now, I saw a lot of people making fun of this because Orthrus is only supposed to have two heads. However, to give the slightest bit of credit here, there are depictions of Orthrus with more than two heads. It's just that two is the most common. It's not any more incorrect than MegaTen's main Cerberus only having one head, because there are depictions of that in Greek history, even though most folks associate Cerberus with having three heads. My point is that no, having a three-headed Orthrus, while unusual, is not inherently incorrect. But you know what? None of that actually matters, because I'm far more focused on the fact that they just stole this sprite from another game. A game where, by the way, it is Cerberus. They flat out took this from Elmanage and expected nobody to notice. So now we're not only dealing with crappy generative AI character designs, but full-blown plagiarism. Yeah, they edited a bit, but come on. Actually, once they got caught with the stolen Orthus design, they did take that screenshot off the Steam page, and the one you fight in the game has a completely different design, but I'm not gonna let them just pretend like that didn't happen. If I were a more pessimistic person, I'd probably say that needing to fire up the generative AI programs to cobble together some new designs and try to scrub the blatantly stolen monsters might be why this game got delayed in the first place. Also, I can't say this one is definitively, but I am like 87% sure that's just Omni-Man. And since I'm being petty and childish anyway, hey, High School Crisis, the track in your trailer sounds like actual farts. Even if I was willing to look past the generative AI art and covered up stolen sprites, High School Crisis just isn't a very good game. The maps are bland and offer little reason to fully explore them. In one of the earlier areas, I was getting stopped every few steps for some random NPC to deliver some pointless dialogue. The closest thing I can say to a positive about the map exploration is I am a bit curious about this in-game clock. Like, maybe you can unlock certain special events by being in the right place at the right time, but I didn't and won't play this game long enough to ever find out for myself. Battles are dull and repetitive, with these ghost condoms ambushing you on the map, often sideswiping you and getting the advantage, by the way. The spells are very MegaTen-esque, with the buffs and debuffs following the Nocturne route of stacking up to 4 times. The plot is a bit derivative, but honestly not anything too bad. The goals are clearly established, get home, and we learn quickly we may have to go through one of the local Demon Realm crime lords to make that happen. But the game is also loaded with grammatical errors and bizarre phrasing, most likely due to the game just being machine translated from its native Korean. The first few times these characters said HR, I read it as human resources rather than homeroom. I get it, localization is expensive, and English probably wasn't their first language. As someone who has taught English overseas, I really don't want to punch down too much regarding the script, or at least the translation of it. I've got other things on my to-do list to berate them over. Or should I say my Toto list. Okay, sorry, I wanted to do that one. So yeah, High School Crisis. The title is dumb. The character designs are incredibly boring and have no charm or personality to them because they're all lifeless generative AI garbage. Did you know 2 of these party members are actually siblings? Have fun trying to guess which ones. The brief handful of maps that I played through were clunky and repetitive, occasionally interrupted by a lackluster battle system without an original bone in its body. The game did say there's some sort of parry system, but I genuinely couldn't get it to work even once. Or maybe I did, because there's very little in the way of visual indicators as to what's happening in these battles. And the music sucks. I don't just mean that fart orchestra from earlier either, but almost every song, from the obnoxious dubstep battle theme to the casino track that's practically screaming, "We've played Persona 5. I wouldn't be surprised if the music was AI generated too, but they didn't say it was on the Steam page disclosure, so maybe I have to give them the benefit of the doubt there. Speaking of Steam, I only played the game for a little under 2 hours before refunding it because screw them. But even ignoring the AI and hastily covered up stolen art, it's not like I had a good time in those 2 hours. High School Crisis is not a game that anybody should support, and I'm hoping that if people search on YouTube for the game, they'll find this video and I can convince a few folks on the fence to not pick it up. Look, if you want a first-person dungeon crawler inspired by Megami Tensei, trust me, there are better titles. I recommend Advent Crossroad or Exodus Checkmate. I have left links to both of those games in the description, and you should check those out instead. They're way better. Oh, speaking of including links, High School Crisis' Steam page says that I can only upload videos of the game if I include the copyright information and store URL in the video description or video itself. Fortunately, it doesn't say how or for how long, so here it is. I know this video was a lot more negative than I usually go for these things, but Look, I just hated basically everything about this. Ever since I started covering Megami Tensei inspired indie games on this channel, I've been blown away by the passion and creativity of some of these developers who work hard to make fun and unique games. I was initially excited when I first heard word of a Korean-developed MegaTen-esque indie dungeon crawler, but the more I learned about it just made it worse and worse until I decided I had to say something. And that something is, don't buy this game. If you want to learn more about MegaTen-inspired indies that don't use AI or plagiarize, I've got a series of videos where I talk about exactly that. So maybe check those out and consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thanks for watching, screw High School Crisis, and take care.